Hello everyone and welcome to Book My Therapy. Today we have Ankita Joshi. She is an RCA licensed clinical psychologist with over 8 years of experience in private practice. Her work focuses on CBT, EFT and internal family systems. She's currently pursuing a PhD and has been featured with Deepika Padukone's Live, Love, Laugh Foundation, reflecting her commitment to ethical, research informed and accessible mental health care. Welcome to Book My Therapy, Ankita.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So, a few questions for you. To start off, what is CBT and how would you explain it to someone who thinks therapy is just about talking about your feelings?
Right. I feel like CBT, when we're talking about CBT, it has a lot to do with assessing our own internal world very deeply. So we break it down into, between an event occurring and your reaction to it, the processes that happen in between. That's what we really talk about in CBT. So, for example, let's just say that your boss called you and said that we need to talk, right? And there are so many internal processes that's going to happen in an individual. Let's just say that I'm coming from this perspective of, oh, what if something goes wrong? You know, I'm going to get anxious. Or if I think maybe it's about my new raise, I'm going to get excited, right? So that's what we basically break down in CBT, the internal processes that happen between an event happening and the conclusion, my behavioral response to that event. So if I go into more detail, we talk about the thoughts that come as a result of, this particular stimuli, right? In this case, we need to talk is the stimuli and the thoughts that come as a result of, oh my God, am I in trouble, right? And then how it made me feel when I thought about it. What is going on within me that made me think about it, my emotions here. And of course, it's not just my emotions. There's so many other variables in the background. Something also in the background made me feel anxious because this is something that has happened to me before. So my pre-existing schema also comes into the picture. So basically, that is what CBT is all about. Identifying these interactions, identifying where, the dysfunction might lie in the context of, my misinterpretation of the current situation, right? Because when we're talking about needing therapy, the idea here is that my reaction to the current scenario is more or less than it needs to be, disproportionate to the current scenario. So, yeah, that's basically what we talk about. We identify these disproportionate responses, figure out what's really going on, in between those processes and try to rectify that.
So, the next is about what is the one common unhelpful thought people have in everyday life and how would CBT help them challenge it or reframe it?
All right. Okay. I feel like the most common one that I usually come across is, if something goes wrong, then it means that I've failed, right? And so I feel like I have to go into a little more details to explain it, okay? Because, like I said, no, it just doesn't occur out of nowhere. It wants past schemas that are present already within us, right? That lead for us to interact with the environment and have these responses. So the environment has taught me that if something goes wrong, that means that, you failed. And there's something deeper within this. So what happens if you fail? Well, someone might say that, let's just say it's an exam, right? So if I don't score, my expected marks, it means that I failed. That means that I'm not good enough. People are not going to appreciate or recognize me, or and just it means that I'm not as amazing or as academically inclined as I thought I was, right? And so the idea here is to really look at whether it is proportionate to the reality that is happening. Are people really going to isolate you or think less of you because you don't score the expected marks that you've decided you need? Is that really going to happen? Sure, people are going to be upset, but does that mean that they're going to abandon you because you're not good enough, right? For example, I'm sure people have failed before, right? This individual also, these individuals rather, their past experiences of failure are so difficult to handle that they do not want to experience it again, right? So idea is going to be to, sort of help them see that that is not entirely true, that they are reacting to the then and there and not really to the here and now, right? To sort of challenge this thought and bring in a more balanced thought, that it would make me sad and it would put me at maybe harm's way of people treating me differently. But whether or not that's true, I'm going to find out through experience. That may not be true. I'm not, we're not, again, CBT is not about invalidating your experiences, keep challenge this thought and it can't be true at all. It's about questioning, is it really as it seems to me from this lens? Because I feel like a lot of times the best analogy for CBT I have is to look at it like you're wearing sunglasses, right? Like you're wearing shades. So if you look at it through that lens, everything's going to look dark, right? So if I'm coming from the perspective of I'm not good enough and I attempt a task, I am probably going to question myself later, even when I've done a good job. So there's really no happiness. Even at the end of, the money pot at the end of the rainbow, you'll never get there, right? Because you're looking at it from a very different lens.
What are some simple techniques in CBT that listeners can use daily to manage stress or low mood?
If we're talking specifically in the context of, again, let's look at it from the lens of a thought, right?
Hmm.
The first step is always going to be to observe the thought. When does it come? You know, thought diary, we call it a thought journal, right? So, like tracking your thoughts. How often does it come? When does it come? What does it look like? What basically, what is it trying to say? What environment triggers it? And then from that trigger, we try and figure out in the process of therapy, of course, this is where it traces back to. So I think this is the first and foremost important thing because you can't control what you can't see, right? So the idea is to first become aware of it. So thought journaling is something that people can do. I think it's journaling in itself, I think, is a very useful self-reflection tool.
Hmm.
Now, another technique is behavioral activation, which can be done. Basically small activities that make you feel a little better when your mood is low. For example, going for a walk instead of, staying in all day. Picking up one simple task and just tiny activities that can make your day a little better. Another thing I think really helps when we're talking about low mood is, talking about these extreme tasks, because when there is low mood, tasks seem very heavy, right? So what we can do there is again break down tasks into smaller categories and try and attempt that instead of the whole thing. For example, let's just say that I've been feeling really low for the last 1 week and my work has piled up, even household chores. I feel like that's the first area that gets impacted when your mental health gets impacted. So let's just say that I have a week worth of laundry to do, and I just don't want to do it. So instead of doing the whole week worth of laundry, you just start with today's laundry. Whatever clothes that you worn today, you just wash that first. Or something like that, just for today, one step at a time, I think. And of course, there are other techniques that can help instantly, such as grounding. I think that really helps when we're talking about anxiety and when one's overwhelmed. Grounding, I think, is a very versatile technique. It even helps during a panic attack, I believe.
Well said.
Yeah.
The next section is about anxiety. When does normal worrying cross a line into anxiety problem that someone should get help for?
When it becomes disproportionate to the environment, that is when the trouble is, right? So let's just say that, there's a spider in my house and I'm just overall scared of spiders. Okay. I may not want to enter the house because of a spider, and that's understandable. But if I say that I'm not going to enter this building because I know there's a spider in this unit, that is a little disproportionate, right? So when my fears are disproportionate, to reality. That is a good, point to start. I feel like it's a spiral that keeps you there. You keep wanting to get out of a situation, but what if? That's what keeps happening. So I feel like when that is happening, when anxiety starts taking over your life, and I think another very common thing that happens with anxiety is avoidance. I think anxiety's best friend is avoidance. So we start avoiding the things that make us anxious, which means that our area of comfort then reduces. It starts shrinking because this makes me a little uncomfortable, so I'm not going to do that because it makes me anxious. For example, talking to people makes me overwhelmed, so I'm just not going to talk to my friends at all. I'm going to not talk to them, isolate myself. So it starts ruining your life. I feel like that's a pretty significant sign that anxiety is sort of taking over. So major changes in one's life, a long while. If you've been experiencing it for a long while and it's starting impacting the quality of your life, it's a good place to start. Individuals with anxiety have the capacity to assess this, right?
Hmm.
When it's happening. Not in the moment, of course. In the moment, it's very emotionally charged.
Hmm.
But after some time, once the incident passes, after some time, they have the capacity to self reflect and realize, ki, oh, maybe I should not have reacted so strongly. Maybe it wasn't a big deal, right? Let's just say that I'm extremely anxious about an exam to the point where I'm having a panic attack and but I'm going to have to get through it somehow in the context of this exam, right? I'm still going to have to go give the exam. So I go and give the exam. And after that, I'm going to think, hey, that wasn't so bad.
If somebody like who we love are experiencing the signs of anxiety, and we notice that in them, how can we encourage them to seek help?
I think that's a very genuine question and also a very difficult one to answer because, the individual in front of you is probably suffering and they might not be willing to accept that this is bothering them because accepting it would mean that something would need to change.
Hmm.
So, what one can do or how they can help, this particular individual who's suffering, I think the most important thing here is to let them know that you're on their team rather than saying, hey, you need to do this or you need to, that's not going to help them
Hmm.
because they're not going to seek help unless they are ready. And they're going to need your support to become ready.
Hmm.
So I think just staying by their side, just that reassurance that I am here no matter what you decide to do. And it's a difficult task, right? Because an individual with anxiety also will constantly seek reassurance. You know, they will constantly keep calling you and saying, oh, this happened. Is it going to be okay? Is it going to be okay? And
Hmm.
it is emotionally draining as an individual. So for caregivers, if we're specifically talking about caregivers, I think the first and foremost advice would be make sure that you have enough emotional support for yourself to be able to be there for your loved ones instead of questioning them or telling them, hey, do this, do that, try this, try that. They want to,
Hmm.
because nobody wants to live with an anxiety. It's exhausting, you know. Nobody wants to live with, even if it is depression, let's just say, nobody wants to live in that headspace, right? But they can't do anything about it. And I think just accepting and saying, hey, I see you, I see that you are suffering, and I'm not going to give you advice. I'm just here if you need my advice.
Hmm.
I'm here if you need to talk about it, or if you need my advice.
In compassion and the safety net as well.
That's
Okay.
very, very important. Yeah.
So, in your
Yeah.
experience, what are some signs that a person is healing or managing their anxiety well and may not need ongoing professional support?
And they've learned how to, number one, identify their own thoughts. Very significant, right? And post that, learn how to challenge their own thoughts. They will learn to identify their own thoughts. Okay, so this is, this thought in itself is making me anxious. What if nobody loves me if I fail? this thought is making me anxious. And then the capacity to delve deeper and ask myself, how did this come into existence? Right. And when they're able to connect the dots and therefore challenge, these ideas, I think, because therapy is not a life support. It's just this thing that helps you get back on your feet. And that being said, it does not mean that these individuals are not going to have emotional breakdowns in the future. They might even have to come back to therapy, and I think that's okay, right? But the idea is that you know where things are going wrong and you know how to deal with it. So yeah, I think when anxiety is no longer dictating every decision that they're making, that they're able to question, this overwhelming thought into why is this happening. I feel like that's when it's okay to move on from therapy in the context of CBT, I believe.
Mm. Beautifully said.
I think it's very important. I think a lot of people believe that, they come back to therapy, it's somehow a failure. It shows that they didn't do a
Mm.
good job, getting better. It
Mm.
is exhausting. Of course, it's exhausting, when you look at it from their lens, because it feels like I've worked so hard and it still didn't work out. Like, what am I doing wrong? You're not doing anything wrong. Everyone has downfalls, and that's okay. It's just like a one little kink in the path. It's going to, work out.
So the next section is about personality and personality disorders. So, how do you define personality in a psychological sense?
I feel like personality is basically, consistent characteristics of an individual that stay steady, relatively steady over time. That's how personality is described. The pattern of an individual's way of thinking, feeling, relating to people in the context of normal life or even under stress,
Mm.
how they express conflicts, how they react to a particular situation. Let's just say that maybe they shut down, maybe they are argumentative. I feel like, again, repetitive patterns that are relatively stable through their life, specific patterns of behavior, yeah, that are consistent.
Hmm. So, can personality change?
That's a very interesting question. I don't think that it can transform entirely, but I feel like elements of it can be worked upon. I mean, the core remains the same, but the expression changes. I think that is the best way to put it.
So, can you
So
explain that?
how? Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I might still feel the same way, but how I express that is different. Let's just say that I am feeling angry about something that is done to me, right? Let's just say that I express that anger with violence,
Mm.
with screaming and yelling. That is one way of expression. When we're talking about any change, the core of that anger will not change. If someone yells at me in this context, let's just say that I was yelled at, right? And my expression of anger was yelling back. Okay.
Mm.
So my behavior will change. My behavior can change. But why I got angry will not change. Does that make sense? Or the way that my brain processes that will not change. My reactions to it might, if that makes sense. My response to the environment will change.
Mm.
So if let's just say that I am someone who has gone to therapy, I might still get upset when someone yells at me, you know. But am I going to yell back in response? Probably no, because I'm more aware of my emotions. I
Mm.
might handle the situation with more calm energy there. I might take a step back and say, "Hey, I don't appreciate you yelling at me, and I will not talk to you when you're yelling at me." That
Mm.
is what I'm talking.
Oh, okay, okay. Okay.
Yeah, how it shows up is what can change.
Mm.
But who I am at the core does not really change.
So, in the context of personalities, like when we use this term personality disorders, what is it? And how are they different from having a certain personality?
I feel like personality disorders, specifically when we're talking about, are an amalgamation of a lot of maladaptive coping strategies. A lot of difficult, experiences that have led to a particular, coping strategies having been developed. Me becoming more vulnerable to certain things and learned to react a certain way to protect myself. Right. So that is when we're talking about, again, normal personality versus, personality disorders. That's the main difference. It's my We're talking about two very different domains here. There can be different types of personalities. Right? There's so many personality theories, Eysenck's personality theory is there, and 16BF, and it's amalgamation of different variables. Right. But when we're talking about personality disorders, we're specifically focusing on the maladaptive, coping strategies or maladaptive schemas that develop as a result of our childhood experiences that have become relatively set. Going to talk about different kinds of personality disorders. I think cluster B would be, the stuff that we're talking about, I guess, borderline personality and narcissistic personality and histrionic personality and antisocial personality. A lot of this is an amalgamation of the environment, social learning, and parenting. So, different factors present in the environment leads to different outcomes there.
Mm.
For example, I think okay, I think the biggest risk factors when we're talking about parenting styles is, permissive parenting, uninvolved parenting. I think that, and of course, extremely controlling parenting styles are high risk factors when we're talking about that.
The next section is about relationships. So, what are some green flags of a healthy, secure relationship that people often overlook?
Green flags. But I feel like this is a good question because usually we're talking a lot about red flags, but green flags are also very important to highlight. So I feel like I think being able to disagree with each other without fear. I think that is the ability to agree to disagree. I think is a big green flag in a relationship. I think it's very important because you can't, fight a battle over relationship. Sorry, over, disagreements, because you need to be able to disagree because you're two different human beings. I think important green flag. The next one I think would be the ability to repair after conflicts. Because having conflicts is again not unexpected, not unprecedented. You're two different individuals with different perspectives. You're going to disagree, right? But if there is a conflict, the ability to repair, I think, is a green flag in a relationship. Next is consistency, I think, is a strong predictor of how long a relationship can last. If you're consistent in terms of initiative and effort towards each other in the relationship, I think that, is very important. And I think one of the biggest green flags is if you feel emotionally safe in your relationship. Very important. So, yeah, I think those would be really significant factors.
Yeah. So, how can someone tell the difference between relationship anxiety and a relationship that genuinely isn't right for them?
It's very important to, I guess, explain this with the help of an example. That would be the easiest way to go about it. Let's just say that I find a hair tie in my partner's cloth, clothes, right? And maybe that hair tie is not mine. Okay. We're going to take this case example here. We don't know if there's something going on or is it me overthinking at this point, right? Now, your emotional reaction to this particular situation describes a lot to whether you're in a healthy relationship or is it your anxiety. What is happening here? Are you being manipulated? Is it your anxiety? See, if your worry goes in the direction of your partner's response to asking that question, that they're going to pick a fight, they're going to be defensive, they're going to argue with you, they're going to get upset that how you would think this way, how can you even think that? If that is the direction that your thoughts are going in, then I would say that you're not feeling emotionally safe in that relationship itself. But when I'm feeling emotionally safe in the relationship, I have the space to ask questions to my partner. I may choose to not ask it due to my own anxiety. And this is where, my own anxiety comes in. I might not choose to ask that question because I'm scared of the answer that my partner might give me. You know, I'm scared that I will find out that he is cheating on me and I don't want to know that. So I'm going to avoid having that conversation. That is a very me related problem, not the relationship related problem. I am scared of finding out in case he is cheating. That's my ruminating, my overthinking. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I like how you differentiated between what you are feeling and what the relationship is about. So internal versus external, clear distinction. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
well said.
Thank you for. I feel like that was a very, crisp way of, you perceiving it. I like that. Yeah, internal versus external. Absolutely.
This question is in continuation to one of the conversations we were having while you're pursuing your PhD. You said that criminology and addictions are interlinked, right? And
Yeah,
this is something that we can see because people can engage in addictive gaming, is what you said, right? Gaming
yeah,
and criminology. So behaviors which are external are easily recognizable, not
mm,
necessarily to the person involved, but to others. So what
yeah.
happens when if these behavioral patterns are internal? So can relationships become addictive? And if so, what might it look like in everyday life?
Right. So I feel like there are a few pillars of addiction, right? Addictive behavior. One is craving, right? One is withdrawal. One is this drive to keep doing it even when it's creating your distress. Okay. So if I'm talking about a relationship, I think absolutely relationships can be addictive, right? Crime can be addictive, gaming can be addictive. We can categorize it in the context of behavioral addiction. Absolutely, it can be addictive if the relationship is not working for you, right? But somehow you're still feeling hung on it. And the bare minimum of response from your partner gives you this happiness, burst of happiness. You're going to get hooked, you know which I think, okay, so you've heard of breadcrumbing, right? This is what happens. So the love bombing again, lot of oxytocin in your system, just so much happiness. Suddenly my partner's paying attention to me, and then slowly over time, when it starts going less and less, in my head I'm still craving that high, right? So I'm so hooked because the tiniest amount that I get makes me feel so happy. So hell yes, I think relationships can be very addictive. I'm going to keep being stuck at it even when it's messing up with my mental health. And people take years to overcome some relationships, man. It's that deep. Some relationships people take years to overcome because the drive is so deep. They will keep going back to the same person again. The whole love bombing thing will happen, and then, suddenly it's gone, and then they're left because there's no hit anymore. You know, because after love bombing, they've just vanished. So now they're craving that, but nobody else's affection is going to bring them the same, high, for the lack of a better word. It's not going to make them feel as good. They're craving the high or attention of this particular person. So I think attention in this context, I think, can be quite addictive. Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
how does one recognize those symptoms internally?
Process of being in a relationship in itself is so, it's like a fireworks in your brain. Your neurotransmitters are having a blast. Let's just say that you started seeing someone. Okay, first time you meet them, you feel great. So you go back home and now you're daydreaming about meeting them again. And then you meet them and it's a blast again in your head. Like, oh my God, it's very reinforcing, isn't it? So you keep waiting for that next hit and keep waiting. Yeah,
No, what I was trying to say is that in the
yeah,
context, we are very different people when it comes to behaving with our romantic partners or intimate relationships compared to friends, parents, sibling,
Yeah,
anybody, right?
absolutely.
So that relationship is very different. And deep down, you will always
Mm.
crave for attention or admiration or whatever like feel good factors one can describe of.
Yeah.
So, in the context of this feel good factors or whatever we may call as addictive patterns, how can one recognize the symptoms in myself or like in the self, or um, consider them as normal, or the
I think
person
I
is engaging
understand
in like
what
highs
you're
and
trying
lows
to
of.
say. Yeah. Okay. I will. Okay. If you are someone who jumps from one relationship to the other without, giving yourself time to heal from the relationship, I think that is, again, this is not coming from a place of, oh, you're addicted to relationships. Coming from more of a place of, something deeper is going on. Maybe you should, it's okay to pause and take a look at what's going on. Because when, someone who moves from one relationship to the other, I think they're very scared of being with themselves. Because being with themselves means that they're going to have to face a lot of, their inner noise that's going on with them. So I think it's like a coping strategy. Even in the context of gaming addiction, children get addicted to gaming, and it starts as them using it as a coping strategy. You notice that people, whatever we look for in our partners is stuff that we crave in our homes. We want to be loved in a certain way that we crave in our homes. For example, let's just say if my, family is very dismissive of me, I'm going to be swept away from my feet if my partner is someone who appreciates me a lot. I'm still going to internally struggle to accept that appreciation, but I'm going to love the attention that gets me. Does that make sense? So what I crave, I look for. And when I get that, it feels so good. All right, now talking about other signs that you might be addicted to, you know, being in love. I think one is absolutely, this inability to stay single for a long time. Apart from that, I think l- losing out on your own life when you're in a relationship, not having your own things to do, your own set of friends, being very dependent on your partner in the context of everything. Let's just say, I'm going to go here if my boyfriend joins. I'm going to meet friends if my boyfriend comes along. I need to go shopping, but I can't because my boyfriend's not free today. Stuff like that. So I think these two are the most significant.
So the next section is of criminology, gaming, and addiction. So for listeners
Yeah.
who may not know what is criminology, how can it help us understand behaviors like gaming addiction and the connection between criminology and the gaming addiction?
I think, okay, so I'm not really a criminology expert, but I would like to, sort of say criminology is basically the study of criminals, understanding their behavior, understanding what's their motive and why they commit the acts that they do. Now, when we're looking at it also from a psychology lens, I think I again, this is my perspective on things. I feel like it's very curious because I feel like all therapists come to therapy with this backdrop of nobody wants to really do mean things or hurt people, right? It's a very humanistic stand, right? So it's also a curiosity. Why do criminals do what they do? Right, even in the context of addiction, like we did talk about it, right? At some spot part of a crime is addictive. For example, let's just say homicidal ideation. Okay, homicide, when an individual mm, thinks of committing homicide, there's a lot of ideating that happens which overlaps with OCD like symptoms. It's obsessive, but it's not troublesome to the individual. They're seeking pleasure from that ruminating, right? And then they commit the crime. So I feel like from that lens, I think this is how, it sort of connects, right? And did you also ask me about gaming addiction and criminology? Like, yeah. All right. So in my understanding, the way that these two connect is that there are a lot of overlaps in the context of the etiology of why people do this, right? When we're talking about gaming addiction, there is impulsivity and low self-regulation, right? Same in the context of when you're looking at criminal propensity, the capacity of or criminal behavior. There is the same root, impulsivity and emotional dysregulation. So, in the context of criminals specifically, there is this inability to mentalize, which is inability to think about their own feelings, right? So, what the inability to mentalize basically, what it does is it creates this exoskeleton, which is a little grandiose, a little narcissistic in nature, because the core inside is insecure, right? So this exoskeleton is a little narcissistic, I am something, I am someone. Now, violence occurs when this is threatened, when this exoskeleton is threatened. And I want you to remember that these individuals do not have the capacity to mentalize, to think about their feelings, right? Therefore, they can't process guilt and shame. There is a dysfunction there, right? So, in order to balance it out, what ends up happening is that in order to reestablish power, they end up committing violent crimes, right? When you're again looking at gaming, okay, and I'm specifically talking about violent gaming. There's a very but there is pride attached to the number of wins, the number of kills, the number of I hope that that connects the dots.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, there is a lot of pride attached to how good I'm, how well I am doing here. Another very interesting overlap I'll tell you is this dehumanization of the target that is common between the two.
Mm.
When we're talking about homicidal ideation, there is dehumanization. So if I am the killer who is ruminating about killing someone, I will dehumanize, which is I have less empathy for you because I do not see you as equal to a human being. I see you as less than a human being,
Mm.
which makes it okay for me to commit such crimes against you.
Mm.
It sort of smoothens the path to my behaviors. I'm able to more easily justify my behaviors to myself. Similarly, in the context of, gaming, online, aggressive, violent gaming, I'm also viewing the person in front of me as less than human. I'm not considering them as human, which means that there is no guilt in killing you because you're not human. Right. So that is also a very interesting overlap.
Yeah, it is interesting, actually.
Let's think about it, okay? When we're talking about domestic violence, violence against women, if you talk to those men, you will realize that they don't perceive them as equals. They don't think women are equal to men. They think that they are less than. They will put themselves on a pedestal and say, oh, you're less than, which is what makes it so easy for them to raise their hand. Statistics are staggering. It's shocking. If I'm going to talk about India, I think a recent 2025 government survey that I'm not going to name any names here, but anyway, so they basically revealed data of 2023, and there is a 2.2% rise in aggressive behavior in context of just juveniles. This I'm talking about just juvenile data, 2.2% rise since the year before, which is 22. So yeah, the world is changing.
It was a good discussion, and I really want to thank you for your time. I wanted to
Me
ask, like, where can people find you?
People can find me online. I am YouTube. I'm on Instagram. You can send me an email. I also have a separate booking link that I will share with you.
Add all of them to the description box so it's easy for reference. Okay. Thank you so
Thank you
much.
so much.